Technically, no. Every expanded universe property released before April 25th, 2014 has been decanonized, now labeled part of the Legends Apocrypha. But is it still canon by Disney's standards is arguably the wrong question. If it still fits well enough, if it still rings true, it can absolutely be canon in our hearts. Especially in light of how most of the Disney trilogy additions to the canon turned out. The Book of Mormon relative to the Old and New Testaments. Specifically, in this video, I'm going to go over each of the campaigns in Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds and rate how well I think they fit in the canon. You're going to be surprised how much work the developers and writers of the game put in on that front. So real quick, if you're not familiar with Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds, it's a real-time strategy game, or RTS, released half a year before Attack of the Clones debuted in theaters. But Galactic Battlegrounds isn't merely an RTS game. It's an RTS game by one of the developers that defined the genre, the creators of the Age of Empires series, Ensemble Studios, in collaboration with LucasArts, of course. The Age of Empires formula is an enduring one, harvesting and building with workers, advancing ages through the tech tree, and fighting with unit types that somewhat counter each other. Galactic Battlegrounds hews so close to this formula that many would have likely labeled it little more than a total conversion mod or reskin had those terms been more common back then. But the game is good, I want to be clear about that. The formula has endured for a reason. But we're not here for the gameplay. We're here to talk about the game's story and surrounding lore, and the storytelling starts as early as the game's tutorial campaign. Now, at first blush, the characters involved in the tutorial seem like they were picked randomly out of a hat. As Qui-Gon Jinn, you help Chewbacca and his father establish a Wookiee colony on Alaris Prime, fending off the Trade Federation. Now, you might already think this scenario sounds wildly out of line with the established events of Episode 1, but here's where things get interesting. Alaris Prime itself, despite being a creation of Galactic Battlegrounds, is currently Disney canon. It is referenced in the High Republic Adventures, a comics series. I should say, this series takes place hundreds of years before most of the events of Galactic Battlegrounds, so there isn't exactly much in the way of direct crossover, but it's very interesting that the concept of this habitable moon in the Kashyyyk system persisted, as so much else has fallen away. The moon itself being Disney-accepted canon is quite the contrast with the events that take place on it, of which I can think of a few issues. For one thing, adding yet another Jedi connection to Chewbacca undercuts the incredulity Han shows to Jedi and the Force in A New Hope. Not more than Chewie already knowing Master Yoda, of course, but it's another amusing data point. It also doesn't make a whole lot of sense that it would take the Wookiees thousands of years to colonize a habitable moon in their home system, though who knows, maybe Zerka Corporation just held them back that much. Of course, the most bizarre implication of this campaign is that Qui-Gon indirectly fought the Trade Federation before the events of Episode 1, as it would have been considerably more difficult for him to do it after. On that note, it is undeniably nice to see Qui-Gon again. On a recent rewatch of Episode 1, I was struck by how much I enjoyed his character, the rogue Jedi Sage playing it fast and loose. It's an understated performance, but I don't think people give the character enough credit. Perhaps he should have gotten the Disney Plus series over Obi-Wan. Liam Neeson is a great actor too. You might remember him from his signature role, Darkman. Admittedly, it's not him voicing the character in Galactic Battlegrounds, but his sound-alike is relatively close, all things considered.
One reality that is inescapable is that there is nothing more valuable than a friend.
Chewbacca's father is also here, in a considerably more dignified role than his original canon debut in the Star Wars Holiday Special. Well, mostly. While these Galactic Battlegrounds appearances are not Disney canon, he himself was apparently recanonized by the novelization of Solo, which names him as one of the Wookiees rescued on Kessel. One of the more interesting aspects of Galactic Battlegrounds is all the creatures you encounter. For example, I'm confident these tutorial missions are the first place many people beheld nerfs. No, not something being made weaker through a patch, these guys. Given their dopey sounds and slow speeds, I can see why being a scruffy-looking nerf herder would be quite the insult. Gundarks also make an early appearance as hostile creatures. One of these missions was also the first time I encountered a Jedi holocron, though they've been a thing in the universe for quite some time by this point. You see a lot more holocrons in games these days, though. Anyhow, this tutorial campaign is quite extensive, and you can really tell they went the extra mile to teach the game to somebody starting from zero, even going so far as to teach you how to share resources and fight alongside allies. I was surprised to find the second to last mission has a fail state if you faff around too much and let your ally's hero unit, Shoran, die. He's no match for droidekas, apparently. Strangely, the failure trigger isn't instant. Guess they wanted to give you a little more leeway. The campaign's final battle ends with a plot tease for the last campaign in the base game, too, alluding to the future Wookiee conflict with the Trandoshan slavers. So, overall, how would I rate this campaign's canonicity? Well, it kinda trips over the first hurdle of not fitting particularly well with what comes after in The Phantom Menace. So not a strong case, even back then. Though it is very interesting to see Alaris Prime plucked for use in the Disney canon. Having gone through the tutorial, we are now done with the prequel to the prequel campaigns. It's at this point I have to mention the YouTube channel The Bread Circus. If you clicked on this video, there's a real good chance you're already familiar with their most impressive work, the very brief 12-hour analysis of The Phantom Menace. Despite what appears to be a bloated runtime, impossible to fill with interesting information, it is quality throughout. It goes into tremendous lore detail, a good bit of it from the games. Pretty much every technology, craft, droid, and glup shitto is discussed. It is a genuine treat. Now, while I couldn't hope to match the depths of their lore knowledge, I take 3 issues with their analysis of Episode 1. Number 1, they skipped right over the implications of Star Wars Episode 1, The Gungan Frontier.
What's on the television tonight, Chubsy?
Missing out on the simulation of the rich tapestry that is Naboo's ecosystem, down to the smallest flora and fauna. Number 2, they could have used Star Wars Droid Works for much of the droid-related footage. I mean, who could say no to the dance animations? And, most pressingly for this video's topic, number 3, they neglected to discuss anything that happens in the Trade Federation or Gungan campaigns in Galactic Battlegrounds. I mostly point this out in jest. I realize there's only so much one can cram into even a 12-hour analysis, but one can't help but want their perspective, as there's a lot to talk about here. To start, we need to talk about the Trade Federation campaign's point of view character, 9. While the droid's name is never said in Episode 1, this is him, a commander battle droid. He is also voiced by Mario, surprisingly. Now, if you think about this for even a second, a battle droid hero makes 0 sense, especially given what happens later on when the droid command ship is destroyed. One wonders how much command he even has over his troops. I mean, the battle droids even rely on the control ship to activate them. But let's set all that aside. He does make sense for a point of view character for the purposes of Galactic Battlegrounds. The mission briefings and outros are narrated by Newt Gunray.
Lord Sidious, we have located Naboo's chief supply center.
With him and Sidious himself having lines in the missions.
The Naboo you encounter must not get word back to the government. Proceed, Viceroy.
The campaign starts strong from a canon perspective, shutting down the communications network in advance of the full invasion. This fits very well given the scene where communications are shown to be cut. As to the mission, it's quite fun to order your battle droids around, stomping the Naboo defense forces and their communications equipment, though I kinda feel bad for them. It was a very interesting choice to have the first non-tutorial campaign be for a bad guy faction. The droids' combat barks are great.
Do not move.
Aided tremendously by the fact that the game takes place before every battle droid had helium modules added to their vocabulators.
Nobody's getting past me, not without a blaster hole in him. I wonder if I'll get promoted for doing such a good job.
Further muddying the waters of how the droids are controlled, there's a mission where you have to recover a droid control unit before you can start building your first base. It seems like there's quite a few layers of control here. I'd love to see a full technical diagram of how all this works, but I think this is what the game is implying at least. The Trade Federation's army is interesting. It's easy to handwave this for gameplay reasons, but it is kind of concerning how the army requires food, often gained by hunting critters, be it from nerfs, or the more Naboo-specific creatures like Phlumpasets or Kadu. There's even some of the delightful denizens of the planet core, the Opie Sea Killer, and Kolo Clawfish. The biggest fish of Naboo, the Sando Aqua Monster, sadly does not make an appearance. One of the more memorable missions in the Trade Federation campaign has you assaulting the coastal city of Spinnaker, a major distribution hub on Naboo. Basically, Space Houston. You engage in urban combat to seize the riches of the city, leveling everything as you go. The mission's objectives aren't entirely clear, but you really only need to secure 10,000 Nova crystals, which are still a canon rare resource, surprisingly. Even more surprisingly, much like Alaris Prime, Spinnaker has also been recanonized by the comics. An interesting pattern here, where modern comics writers are reusing old pieces of the EU canon. As you might not be surprised to find out, the Trade Federation campaign takes you to Theed. I have to say, I was floored by the attention to detail in the map here. Sure, there's a lot of reused housing assets, but if you compare the mini-map to some of the maps of Theed that appear in other canon, they were kind of cooking here, as the kids say. While the game's engine clearly was not going to support the tremendous cliff face on the backside, they tried pretty hard to match the look and feel, and even modeled quite a few unique structures, such as a distinctive hangar complex. If you watch carefully, you can even see the Naboo Royal Starship fleeing your assault. Though this is wrong for two reasons. Number one, this starship should be fleeing some time after the invasion is complete, and number two, it should also be fleeing in the opposite direction relative to the city center. Regardless, it's a nice touch. They clearly spent quite a lot of time modeling the palace, too. Strangely, the mission requires you to build a monument smack in front of the palace to claim victory, which puts quite a damper on how canon this all feels, as I certainly can't say I recall that in any of the shots of the palace from the movie. Another plotline of the Trade Federation campaign that fits well within the canon is that it has you hunt down the underwater Gungan city of Otoh-Gunga, once again wisely using events implied to have happened in Episode 1. And look who decided to show up with his fancy Sith infiltrator, Darth Maul himself. Without question, the series' most famous Zabrak. Sorry, Bayodur. In service of finding intel on Otoh-Gunga, Maul captures a Gungan leader, Boss Gon, leading to, without question, the greatest single spoken line in Galactic Battlegrounds, perhaps the entire extended universe itself.
What is you? Some kind of devil thing?
This is, of course, very racist, but also very funny. Boss Gon has a very minor role in all this, opening gates on the path to Otoh-Gunga. The finale of the campaign is the destruction of Otoh-Gunga itself, which requires you to use the Trade Federation's navy, which does conceptually make sense given the underwater nature of the city. Naval combat itself is pretty enjoyable, with the artillery ships shooting their deadly toothpaste and making short work of Otoh-Gunga's buildings. Upon destroying the throne room, you win the campaign. But here's something special about all the campaigns in Galactic Battlegrounds. They come with bonus missions. This one is labeled an alternate historical simulation, so you know it's not even remotely trying to be canon. It lets you play the battle at the end of Episode 1 from the Trade Federation's perspective, which, if the existence of Jar Jar and the Gungans writ large offends you, is probably quite cathartic. Especially as it's one of the few places I'm aware of where you can hear Jar Jar's delightful death rattle. Similar to the battle for Theed, I appreciate the attention to detail here, even if the creative vision is somewhat distorted by the limitations of the game. Setting aside the bonus mission, I think the campaign did a pretty great job fitting in the canon, for the most part. I'd rate it at least an 8 out of 10. As I alluded to earlier, there is indeed a full Gungan campaign. It avoids immediate redundancy with the Trade Federation campaign by wisely having the first half set 3,000 years before the events of the movies during what can only be described as the Gungan Sengoku Jidai. Jedi, not to be confused with Jedi, of course. The campaign is told from the perspective of Boss Nass. His sound-alike narrates the blurbs before and after each mission, complete with the flapping jowl sounds.
Only the evil Gungan warlord Rogo would send Bursas against his own people.
If you're a fan of Gungan speech patterns, this is your campaign.
User must go into the forest and find the beasts.
Misa will bring back many fine animals for the Munchen.
As fun as this is, it might have been interesting to hear a Gungan indigenous language rather than their interesting dialect of Galactic Basic. Though there's no real evidence of any such language in any of the new or Legends canon, so maybe they're just like that. You meet Nass's ancestor, Boss Gallo, riding a Kadu, which you may remember from the Gungan cavalry in Episode 1. The Kadu feature prominently in the Gungan Grand Army, in addition to showing up on the map as food animals you can hunt, of course. Unfortunately for Boss Gallo, his village is beset by between 30 and 50 feral Naboo hogs. Or Bursas, in this case. These critters are a Galactic Battlegrounds invention, but once again, modern canon authors have plucked from the extended universe continuity and included it in the modern reference book, Star Wars Smuggler's Guide. Even if it's on the margins, I think this kind of thing goes a long way towards mending the canon. Less defensible in the canon are the Glurgs, the Gungan worker unit. These bizarre, non-sentient frogs raise a lot of interesting questions about Gungan society. Apparently, the Gungans have some kind of strange syncretic evolution thing going on, with the Glurgs handling their menial labor. Pity this isn't explored anywhere else in the canon. An amusing implication of seeing the Gungan forces both in the prequel continuity and 3,000 years ago is that Gungan technology has not appreciably changed in those 3 millennia. Not exactly an era of Gungan excellence. Come on guys, even the Pakleds figured out space travel eventually. Later on, in the campaign mission where you unite the Gungan clans, it's implied that there is, as viewers of Episode 1 may have suspected, a Gungan boss physiognomy. All of the Gungan bosses you encounter over the course of the game use the same in-game model, whether on foot or on Kadu. The final mission in the historical set has you defeat Boss Rogo, the villainous Gungan who had unleashed the feral animals on your village at the beginning of the campaign. Gallo proudly proclaims a new future. This is pretty funny because it marks a point in the game where it's not even canon with itself. We saw Odo Gunga in the Trade Federation campaign, and the landscape looked nothing like this. Admittedly, a lot can happen in 3 millennia, but still. The second set of Gungan missions pop you right back into Episode 1. You guide Boss Nass and the retreating Gungans from Odo Gunga to their sacred place. I gotta say, it's kind of weird the statues dotted around said sacred place are decidedly human. Maybe they're unrelated to what makes the place sacred, but there's not much else in this location, so it does raise some interesting questions. After Nass arrives and clears out a local Trade Federation outpost, the main cast of the Phantom Menace shows up. Anakin, Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, Padme, Panaka, and of course, the key to all this, Jar Jar himself.
Ow!
All of them voiced hero units. They gave quite a few barks to Jar Jar specifically.
Misa feeling okie day. General Jar Jar reporting. Misa here. Jar Jar at use and servicing. This and Binks.
As you might expect, you need to move them to the sacred place to meet Nass. In terms of the movie canon, sure, this could have all happened off-screen, though the vibes of the scene in the movie don't really have the feel of the party having fought through multiple squads of Trade Federation forces to get there. But it does make sense as the kind of mission you'd want in this game to tie into those events. The soundalikes briefly recreate the scene, with Nass having a particularly violent jowl movement. The rest of the Gungan campaign is largely about liberating the areas previously conquered in the Trade Federation campaign. One of the missions has you secure the Famba creatures that the Gungans use to carry their shield generators and heavy weaponry. Which, it's a little hard to believe the Trade Federation would both know that these creatures are used by the Gungans for this, and that they would not simply also eradicate them, rather than keeping them under guard. I suppose they have a soft spot for native wildlife? The Gungans' bonus mission imagines a world where they won the Battle of the Grassy Hills without the droid control ship being destroyed, with them pushing on to retake Theed. This is way cooler in concept than execution, because if you'll recall the Trade Federation campaign, this is just a faction swap of the mission where they invade the capital. But I suppose a Theed is something everyone needs. Overall, the Gungan campaign fits well into the movie canon, all things considered. I'd give it a 9 out of 10. So for the next campaign, we're gonna jump forward to the original trilogy era. Don't worry, I will indeed come back to the sizable Clone War era expansion campaigns, but for now let's continue through the base game, namely the Empire campaign, featuring the man himself, Darth Vader, as your field commander. His sound-alike voice actor is pretty dead on.
The rebels are sure to have lookouts to warn them of approaching danger.
Meanwhile, the mission briefing and outro segments are voiced by a mysterious woman who refers to Palpatine as her master.
A long time have I watched the man called Darth Vader from the darkness, from the shadows of my master's chambers.
The campaign kicks off immediately after the destruction of the first Death Star. You, as Vader, lead a strike force to demolish the rebel base on Yavin 4. This hits different in the wake of Andor Season 2. I really hope the Yavin 4 barber made it out okay. The mission ends with General Dodonna doing something rather surprising.
The surprise is mine, bucketheads!
This strange explosive action levels the temple, but General Dodonna himself is captured. Intel about future rebel actions is retrieved from him via Mind Probe. In hindsight, I think I prefer the Rogue Squadron Rebel Strike take on this situation. Minus the on-foot sections, of course. Notably, his being captured is now explicitly contradicted by modern canon, as in a 2015 Marvel Comics series, he was never captured and instead continued to lead rebel forces. So congrats on your new life, General. After this, the campaign takes you to Raytha, which is an Imperial food production planet stated to supply 1/10 of the Imperial food supply. This is another planet exclusive to Galactic Battlegrounds, not referenced anywhere else in the canon, but it's believable enough in concept. It also makes me wonder about the interstellar logistics behind how the denizens of Coruscant are fed. I can't imagine there's a lot of agriculture going on there. Probably takes the entire output of a few more planets like Raytha. Anyhow, here you get access to your first Imperial base. The Imperial Army has quite a few interesting units from a lore perspective. The worker unit, for instance, is the ASP-9, which is part of the same ASP series as the droid that bops another on the head in the special edition of A New Hope. While the ASP-9 itself is not specifically mentioned elsewhere, the series does have some interesting lore. Apparently, Vader used one of them as a lightsaber training opponent? Poor thing. A unit more common in the wider Legends canon is the Noble All-Terrain Personal Transport, or ATPT, a lesser cousin of the ATST, originally introduced to the canon by the Thrawn trilogy in the early 90s. If you played Star Wars games back in the day, pretty good odds you saw these guys. Regrettably, looking at its canon Wikipedia page, it appears to be just barely hanging on to canonicity at all. Which is better than it being entirely forgotten, but it's kind of wild how such a common staple in many of the games was all but erased by the mouse. I mean, it's even in the Essential Vehicle Guide. Just look at it. Ooh yeah, now that's what I'm talking about. But the most interesting unit the Imperials field from a canon perspective has to be the Dark Trooper, a fierce combat droid unit. You may recall seeing these menacing droids in the last good season of The Mandalorian. Now, if you've been questioning how Star Wars games can influence the wider canon, I want you to consider this. The Dark Troopers were a creation of Star Wars Dark Forces, the FPS created by LucasArts back in the day. Oh yes, in this house, we respect the many exploits of Kyle Katarn. The Rafa mission has you attack a sizable Rebel base. Yes, you are seeing that correctly. The Rebels' worker units are R2 astromech droids, complete with Death Rattle. Later on, when you play the Rebel faction, you find out these are R2-D5 units. Given all their functions, perhaps they're distant cousins of the C2-R4 model. I mean, just look at this thing. After putting down the rebellion on Rafa, Vader heads to Zaloris. This planet is another Galactic Battlegrounds creation, but is bizarrely referenced in a modern canon children's book version of The Empire Strikes Back, which is apparently a thing. Galactic Battlegrounds stakes out quite a few interesting canon events happening here. You start the mission meeting with the planetary governor, who is wonderfully named Trance Dakar. After reuniting with your captured forces, and choking one out real quick, you find out Colonel Veers has been kidnapped. You might remember him from the Battle of Hoth. He led the assault from his AT-AT. He's the target maximum firepower guy, which, even while it's kind of a throwaway line, still has more aura than anything said by any of the First Order generals. You quickly have to move to rescue him before he's taken to the main rebel base on the map. It is actually possible to outright fail the mission if you go the wrong way and run out of time. You escort Veers to an Imperial research facility where he boards a prototype AT-AT, the implication being that this is where the AT-AT was developed. Regrettably, this doesn't even match up with the old Legends canon, as AT-ATs had been deployed far earlier than this in the timeline, and produced by a known Imperial manufacturer, Kuat Drive Yards, which is, you know, on Kuat. Regardless, you escort the prototype to a second base in the south to complete installation of its weapons systems. Confusingly, this base is labeled Fondor 2, which also doesn't make sense because Fondor is a completely different planet, a massive manufacturing hub in the Empire. In Andor, you may remember the delightfully modified Fondor Hullcraft. Presumably the standard version of the ship was made there. Anyway, the prototype AT-AT is rechristened the Blizzard 1. This is actually still the canon name of Veer's specific walker in Episode 5, named that way because it's part of the Blizzard unit, which specializes in cold weather combat. As you may have already put together, it makes zero sense to name the unit this here in the decidedly warm weather conflict on Zaloris. Regardless, I suppose they deserve some credit for matching the right character with the right vehicle name. The mission ends with Veers claiming Rebel transmissions are pointing to activity in the Elrude system. This may be a fun reference to the Operation Elrude pen and paper RPG book by West End Games, not to be confused with the Star Wars campaign taking place in the Arthur universe, Operation Elwood. But strangely, the next mission is on Hoth, famously from the Hoth system? Yeah, kind of a weird lore conflict here, as there's not a lot on the Elrude system even in the Legends canon. All I can figure is that they meant the next mission in the chain to take place on Elrude, and that mission got cut somehow. Notably, it also means the tip-off that there's a rebel base on Hoth happened in the previous mission, which doesn't line up with the beginning of Empire Strikes Back. So yeah. Now, the Hoth mission is arguably the height of the Empire's campaign, but we're already off to a bad start. They got the name of the Star Destroyer disabled by the Ion Cannon correct though, the Tyrant. I definitely didn't know this, but in the Legends canon, it was later captured by the Rebellion and rechristened the Rebel Dream. Not exactly award-winning naming there. As one might expect, the AT-ATs of Blizzard Squadron show up. Annoyingly, the developers felt the need to number each of them, I suppose for parity with Veer's Blizzard 1. However, this has the secondary effect of making it so you can't quick select the entire group because they are all different hero units. Annoying, but not unmanageable. As you take out the shield generator and approach Echo Base, you encounter waves of Wampas for some reason. This doesn't line up with anything in Empire, though I will say I'm reminded of the challenge point bearing caves in Shadow of the Empire for the Nintendo 64. Real EU classic there. As the battle draws to a close, you see Luke's X-Wing and the Falcon leave from the primary hangar bay. Similar to the Royal Cruiser leaving in the wrong direction in the Trade Federation campaign, this also doesn't quite line up with the order of things, mostly because Luke didn't leave until a scene later, and not from the hangar. Regardless, with the destruction of Echo Base, the campaign draws to a close. You finally find out the hidden identity of the narrator.
But Mara Jade will have her day.
So here's where the rubber meets the road in terms of how the Disney canon diverged from the EU canon. Mara Jade's Wikipedia page might genuinely be the longest entry for a non-movie character. Why is that, you might ask? Well, if you didn't know, originally, Mara became Luke Skywalker's wife. They even had a son, Ben. That's right, EU Luke fucks. We were sadly robbed of this cooler Luke. In hindsight, perhaps this one change should have been something of a red flag for where the sequel trilogy was going. I should probably mention, playing this game was my first time hearing about Mara Jade. I'll cop to not having read all that many Extended Universe books as a kid, though I did somehow manage to read each and every book in the Jedi Apprentice series. Though of that series, I mostly just remember something about a lightsaber whip. Uniquely, the Empire campaign in its Imperial splendor has not one, but 2 bonus missions. Though rightly, the first of them taking place in Cloud City doesn't really play like one. I suppose it makes sense to end the main campaign at Hoth, but this is a natural continuation of the campaign timeline. From the initial description, you might think this a quaint, baseless mission, but no, it quickly devolves into a block-by-block Stalingrad-like affair. You fight along massive city plates on the surface of Cloud City, requiring you to use transports to go between them. In hindsight, I kind of prefer the simplicity of Empire at War's version of Bespin, but that's neither here nor there. Your main objective in this mission is to capture and defend gravity control centers, as the rebels intend to scuttle the city by taking the technology it uses to float offline. Hold on, let me try my best Imperial accent for this one. Cloud City is held aloft by 3,600 repulsor lift engines. Repulsor lifts require the use of local gravity, so it is entirely appropriate that gravity control centers be used for their operation. Although their placement on the surface of the concourse is somewhat questionable a design choice. More questionable is the Rebellion's choice of tactics here, as quite a few innocent people would doubtlessly go down with the city, as would all the remaining defenders themselves. Anyway, the mission is fairly unique in that you do not collect resources the traditional way, but instead liberate them by destroying storage facilities. If not just for that reason, that may have been why it was relegated to bonus status. The second bonus mission is another alternate reality simulation, daring to dream of a world where the Empire win the Battle of Endor. It's a pure defense mission where you have to defeat waves of attackers, which is more difficult than it might sound as they come from all sides, and in great number. It's also fairly campy and extremely non-canon for obvious reasons. The Imperial campaign, while it hits some high points, does not fit the canon anywhere near as well as the previous campaigns, so unfortunately I'll have to assign it a very generous 3 out of 10. The Rebel campaign begins sometime before A New Hope, though the overall framing device is that these events are being described much later by Wedge Antilles in his logs.
Pilot Journal, entry 33-1.
Wedge, of course, being an original trilogy character featuring in more than a few Legends stories, as well as a few modern canon stories too. He regales the tale of Leia going to a planet called Krant to rendezvous with a Bothan spy. This is already kind of sloppy skullduggery, as you would presumably not want to risk a VIP like Leia to recover an asset like this. I guess not everybody in the Rebellion operated on Luthen's level. Even worse, her choice of ship for this mission is a Gallifrey medium transport, the Cretacean. It crash lands after being engaged by a TIE interceptor. While I realize the Rebels were rather limited in their navy, surely, essentially anything else would have been a safer bet. Not 100 feet to the east, you encounter a village you can take over, complete with a Jedi who survived Order 66, or the Jedi Massacre as he calls it.
I sensed a disturbance in the Force.
You're a Jedi Knight?
I have been in hiding since the Jedi Massacre.
It's easy to forget there was a digital age time before the prequel canon was fully established. And on that note, while some take issue with how many Jedi survived Order 66 in both the extended universe and modern canon, Revenge of the Sith itself contains a fairly overlooked plot point where the distress signal from the Jedi Temple is subtly changed, instructing the remaining Jedi to stay away. In that context, it's not particularly difficult to imagine more than a few Jedi making it through this period alive. Though it is a bit rich to trip over one so quickly here. The Force truly works in mysterious ways. Anyhow, this is Echuu Shen-Jon. He's voiced by Mojo Jojo, if you couldn't tell.
I see much strength in you.
This early low-tech mission is a great place to get acquainted with the Rebel forces, as well as all of the delightful R2 worker animations. The weird contorting they do when seeding farms is not entirely unlike some of the strange animations in the holiday special, but that's probably a coincidence. It's interesting that the Rebel mounted unit is the Tauntaun, which is canonically a native of Hoth. I can't imagine they're enjoying the more temperate climate here. Similarly, you see the Imperials ride the special edition dewback lizards everywhere, when they are a native life form of Tatooine, which, now that I'm saying that out loud, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for the Empire, as the Imperial presence on Tatooine was rather peripheral. So it would be strange for them to have the knowledge and training to produce any significant amount of dewback-mounted divisions, particularly relative to the rest of their mechanized arsenal. Maybe that guy was just fucking around. Anyway, you close out your stint on Krant by meeting the elusive Bothan spy you've been looking for. It's one of a very, very few instances of seeing and hearing them, so it's kind of special, even if his character portrait looks like a rejected Star Fox 64 model.
The information I bring you is grave.
Go ahead, Utrick.
The Empire has acquired the Vorna II.
You know of this Vorna II, Echuu?
It is an ancient Jedi artifact.
And so you're introduced to the MacGuffin of the campaign, the Vorna II, an ancient Jedi artifact, presumably a kind of holocron. If you haven't heard of it, I don't blame you. As you might imagine, it's another Galactic Battlegrounds exclusive, so not the most supported by the wider canon. Though it certainly wouldn't be the last time a holocron was used as a plot device in a Star Wars property. What's on it? Unclear. The game does not elaborate beyond vague Jedi secrets. The next mission takes you to an asteroid called Gettys to steal the Vorna II back from the Empire before it's transported to Coruscant. The asteroid tile set is pretty sweet. Instead of trees, you have carbon-bearing rocks, and you can see space surrounding the walkable areas. In hindsight, it may have even helped inspire the very similar space tile set in the Empire Earth expansion pack. Leia calls in some support for this mission. Her old friend, the Wookiee chieftain Chewbacca.
I thought we might need some help on this operation. So I sent a transmission to my old friend Chewbacca. He's a very powerful Wookiee chief.
So we can add yet another pre-New Hope Chewbacca connection to the chart. Given Han was close enough to the family to fly Chewbacca home for Life Day, you would have thought he'd mentioned some of these connections at some point, but I guess it just never came up. Yeah, I'm treating the holiday special as more canon than Rise of Skywalker. Anyway, using the troops at your disposal, you claim the Vorna II by smashing the Sith temple containing it, and have Mojo take it back to the ship. At which point, this scene plays out.
You have desecrated my Sith temple. How did you escape the purge, Jedi?
Princess, go!
I won't leave you, Echuu!
I'll always be with you. It had to be broken apart. It was too powerful for one Jedi to possess.
For that, you will pay dearly.
Well, that's familiar for a variety of reasons. If you didn't catch it, Echuu just shattered the holocron and then sacrificed himself to protect Leia. If she had a nickel for every time a Jedi Knight sacrificed himself to defend her from Vader, she would have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird it's happened twice, to say nothing of the amusing resemblance to a certain plot beat in Jedi Fallen Order. But yeah, this all feels pretty weird canon-wise. If this stuff had happened prior to A New Hope, you could bet your bottom dollar it would have come up when Vader met Leia again on the Tantive 4. It just doesn't ring true in either the Legends era context or the modern context. Tragically, of all the campaigns, the Rebel campaign is perhaps the least believable, but the campaign is not over yet. In fact, this plotline isn't even over yet. You skip forward to an unspecified point in the future after Luke and Leia were reunited. They come back to Geddes, now terraformed and renamed Hanoon, to hunt the shards of the artifact. Mainly because Echu's Force Ghost told them to. I'm sorry, they did not need to copy Obi-Wan's whole thing this hard. Not everybody needs to become a Force Ghost. Sorry, Mojo. So yeah, Luke and Leia and a painfully southern lady manning a blaster cannon.
Blaster cannon primed.
Hunt down the shards of the Vor-Natu. The shards are held by local villages, which turn them over to you when you take out their Imperial garrisons. Except for one village that demands you pay them for it. Charming. You also come across the leader of the local resistance, Lave Parinthian, which is not just an extremely Star Wars-ass name, but also an extremely EVE Online-ass name if you ask me. The final mission of the campaign has you fighting to liberate the asteroid from the Empire, specifically by taking over the Terraforming Control Center, which is the reused Gravity Control Center model from Bespin, but given how much else is bespoke in the game, I'll give them a pass on that. The mission starts baseless, though you are supplied with R2 units to make one later. You slap down your command center on the edge of the enemy base and build up a force, gradually raising the entire enemy base to the ground. Mechanically, it's a great mission, not entirely unlike some levels of Perimeter. Plot-wise, though, it's more than a little bit confused. After silencing the enemy base, you detect a disturbance in the Force from the temple where the Vor-Natu shards are being kept, only for Luke to arrive and find out the shards have crumbled and blown away in the wind? Kind of weird that he didn't just destroy them when he had the chance, but whatever. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, the Rebel campaign is kind of bad. While it is mechanically interesting in places, the plot beats feel thin even by the standards of RTS stories. It has the distinct impression of being the first campaign they created, based on the wonky feeling of some of the early missions and the weak storytelling. Perhaps as something of an apology, the campaign features 3 bonus missions, which is basically half a campaign right there. The first bonus mission is Hoth. Again. Sadly, it's pretty far from the Imperial version. This one is basically a playable cutscene. Not a very well put together cutscene either. After the Falcon flies out of the base, they didn't have it fly all the way off the map and despawn. Instead, it just flies to a random spot on the map and floats there. Charming. It goes without saying you don't do the tow cable thing either. Shadows of the Empire remains undefeated. The next bonus mission takes place on Endor. The venerable Wicket the Ewok is here. We probably don't have time to go through all of his bizarre extended universe adventures, but it is quite remarkable how much hay they made out of one incredibly minor character in Return of the Jedi. Writers are still at it too, apparently. There are, I shit you not, actual Disney canon Ewok comics. Strangely, there are dewbacks in the wild here, which doesn't make a lot of sense, as again, they are natives of Tatooine. Perhaps if the dewback-mounted forces are a core part of the Imperial military, they may have introduced them as an invasive species to the planet, deliberately with the intent to utilize them later on. Okay, probably not, but it's the only explanation that I can think of. Honestly, this rendition of Endor isn't a bad baseless mission, all things considered, though as before, it doesn't quite line up with the Empire's version. Still, I suppose it does fulfill the novelty of playing through this part of the movie, if only slightly. Though sadly, there's no elaborate Ewok traps to kill AT-STs. Finally, there's the Silken Asteroid Field Challenge Mission, all caps. Notably called that instead of bonus mission like the rest. This label is not entirely unwarranted, as you can't place farms and have to rely on passive food income, or harvesting the local Minox. There's literally no other reference to the events of this mission in the canon, but it's alright from a gameplay perspective. Though you can really tell they didn't put a lot of thought into the intro and outro. Anyhow, as mentioned earlier, this really didn't fit in terms of the canon at all, either extended universe or modern. 2 out of 10. And finally, we get to the last campaign of the base game, the liberation of Kashyyyk. After the Battle of Endor, Han and Chewie receive a troubling transmission from the planet asking for help. Unable to get Rebel backup, they elect to fly to the planet and solo, in both senses of the word, whatever they find. This kind of rocks, honestly, and is way cooler than whatever stupid animal smuggling they got up to at this point in the current canon. The campaign is even narrated by Lando's sound-alike, adding yet more cool factor.
They say there's a star in the sky for every fool in the galaxy. Well, 2 of those stars must be for Han and Chewie.
As alluded to at the end of the tutorial campaign, Kashyyyk has been invaded by Trandoshan slavers. If you're a Glup Shido enthusiast, you might remember the few seconds of bounty hunter Bosk's screen time from Empire Strikes Back. He's one of them. Strangely, the Trandoshan homeworld, Trandosha, is actually in the Kashyyyk system itself. This does shrink the universe quite a bit to have the 2 homeworlds so close to each other, but at least they don't have to share one, like the Quarren and Mon Cal's. So the Galactic Battlegrounds version of Kashyyyk is fine for what it is. It has a few giant tree doodads here and there. It lacks the majesty of KOTOR's portrayal of the planet though, to put it lightly, particularly the dangerous Shadowlands. On that note, between the Zerka Corporation, the famed droid attack on the Wookiees, and now the Trandoshan invaders, you really have to feel for the denizens of Kashyyyk here, perhaps one of the most invaded peoples in the galaxy. After making your way through much of the map, liberating various groups of Wookiees from the slavers, you encounter Weebaka, not to be confused with Weeb Baka. Han is immediately suspicious of him.
There's something not right about that Weebaka. We're gonna need to watch out for him.
Now, towards the end of the mission, you enter the city of... Wait a minute. Wait a goddamn minute. I know that sound.
Kids Part Garbage Disposal.
Galactic Battlegrounds sampled the holiday special for Unit Barks. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. I know I shouldn't be too surprised, as previously they used the name for Chewbacca's father, established by the holiday special and all, but this is just beautiful. After gathering the Wookiee stragglers together, Chewbacca cows Han into helping build a government complex.
How is reconstructing a Wookiee tree center helping us to make contact with Lando and Luke? Okay, I'll start building.
This is to create a rallying point for the Wookiees to fight back from. The building itself is the Wookiee monument structure, and it takes quite a while to construct. Very nice looking though, not entirely dissimilar from Portland's airport. After it's built, the real wait begins. You have to defend it for 200 days. In-universe, I'm pretty sure we're not meant to believe that Han spends nearly 2/3 of a year here, so this is a bit of an incongruity. Perhaps the days pass quicker on Kashyyyk? Anyhow, the next mission starts with you on a path to a Wookiee village to launch an attack on Imperial communications jammers. However, as Han so mimetically puts it,
I knew it. It's a trap.
The intel was false, planted by Weebaka to get them killed. How rude. You escape this dastardly trap through the power of...
deportation!
No, I'm serious. You have to harvest the trees separating you from the water, and then transport the main characters out of danger. This might legitimately be the shortest mission in the game. You do actually get to destroy the aforementioned Imperial jammers in the next mission, allowing Han to call for help.
This is Han Solo, to the New Republic headquarters. Come in, please. We need you to send reinforcements immediately. Repeat, we need you to send reinforcements immediately. I don't know. I can't be sure they got the message.
I'm not so much annoyed by the sound-alike not really hitting the notes as I am annoyed that the dialogue itself isn't really selling what the Wookiees are going through here. I mean, Chewbacca is strong, Lord knows it takes a whole moon to stop him, but he needs that support, and I'm not hearing the urgency. Regardless, you take the fight to the Imperial Palace on Kashyyyk, where Moff, Dark, and the slaver Pect are lurking. Both of these characters are Galactic Battlegrounds originals, as you might expect, though surprisingly Dark was apparently utilized again in the EU novel Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader. Say that 10 times fast. He was even mentioned somewhere in the Rogue One Ultimate Visual Guide, making him modern Star Wars canon, if only barely. I suppose the name Dark was so on the nose for a bad guy in Star Wars, he kind of had to come up again. Anyway, you liberate the local Wookiee city and destroy his palace. Pretty nice sprite work on the structure too, all things told. Destroying the palace triggers an in-game cutscene where Chewbacca has his revenge on Wee Baka, with Pect and Dark fleeing to an orbital platform above Kashyyyk. Can't help but wonder if this orbital platform tile set wasn't at least somewhat inspired by the ones in StarCraft. Some of the most important missions in the game took place on orbital platforms. Great doodads too, needless to say. My favorite orbital platform in Star Wars, though, has to be Telos Station from KOTOR 2, though I'd give the platform blocking access to Scarif a close second. Anyhow, the call to the Rebels placed a few missions back is finally answered, by Lando himself even. The mission to take down the platform has some fairly interesting objectives, namely, destroying the airfields on a timer to prevent the escape of Pect and Dark, as well as saving Chewbacca and other Wookiees who were abducted. The mission is somewhat let down by the game's less than ideal pathfinding. This isn't usually a problem, but the connecting pieces of the orbital platform are rather narrow. Pathfinding is generally much better in modern RTS games than these older classics, often making it a bit hard to go back sometimes. Once you blow up the platform itself, you win the Wookiee campaign, and by extension complete the base game of Galactic Battlegrounds, if you've been playing the campaigns in order. Though there is a single bonus mission that becomes available, the liberation of Kessel. Thanks to Solo, we do actually have a modern canon interpretation of Kessel to compare to. If you think about it, Solo is arguably one of the better Disney Star Wars movies, though I realize I'm damning with extremely faint praise. The Kessel we see in Solo is a bit more temperate and cavernous than the Kessel of Galactic Battlegrounds, though it is interesting that in both versions a sizable portion of the miners are Wookiee prisoners. The Imperial presence on Kessel in Solo is essentially non-existent relative to what you fight here in Galactic Battlegrounds. Dear God, there's a fortress every 100 feet or so. If you get a kick out of slowly working your way around a map with blaster artillery, I guess this is your mission. But oh boy does the novelty of Kessel run dry quickly for me as a result of this. The mission could have been a lot worse though. In the briefing it's implied you need to get atmospheric processors online before people start suffocating. If you've played through any RTS games in your life, that probably screams timed mission to you. But blissfully, they did not go there. You bring the processors online as you feel like it, and finally, with a delightful quip from Han,
Fresh air? I've smelled better air in a trash compactor, old buddy.
We are done with the base game. Despite taking exactly as long as you're likely imagining, it was quite a ride. The Wookiee campaign is definitely one of the stronger campaigns, and if not just because of the delightful holiday special connections, I have to give it a solid 8 out of 10 for how well it fits. I realize I should probably take a few more points off for not lining up with Solo or The Force Awakens perfectly, but it's still a breath of fresh air, relatively speaking. But now we need to talk about the Clone Wars expansion campaigns. A lot of people have fond memories of many Clone Wars properties, myself included, and I'm deeply curious how they hold up. The factions are exactly what you'd expect for an Episode 2 tie-in: the Confederacy of Independent Systems and the Republic. As the campaigns have an intended order, let us begin with the Confederacy. From a movie canon standpoint, the campaign does not start on great footing. Your first mission is to clear the way for Dooku as he walks from the arena, presumably to the hangar where his ship is parked. Except, problem, we see how he gets to that hangar in Attack of the Clones itself. He did not walk. Walking simulator antics aside, you are also introduced to your hero character for the campaign, Sev'rance Tan, which is also probably a furniture color used exclusively by Lumen Industries. She's a dark acolyte of Dooku's. While not present in the movies, there's quite a few dark acolyte glup siphos in both the Legends and modern canon, which tend to crop up attached to the more well-known characters of various eras. Notably, Tan is Chiss, the same species as Thrawn. If you played the Imperial Agent pathway in the Old Republic, you may have encountered quite a few of them. Interestingly, Tan's unit icon is a stylistic departure from every other icon in the game. Her unit portrait is a drawing with a very crunchy EU book cover feeling. Perhaps it was originally concept art used as a placeholder that they just ran with. It gives the proceedings a little bit of a fan mod feeling. One way or another, it was certainly a choice. The briefing of the second mission starts with Dooku coping hard.
While some might call the Geonosis incident a setback, I prefer to think of it as lulling the Jedi Council into a sense of false confidence.
He dispatches Sev'rance to build an army on an abandoned orbital platform near Tatooine, of all places. It doesn't ring true that this particular platform would be overflowing with resources given the, locals, but it's a fine enough place for a briefer. On that note, you start the mission with a whopping 150 population cap, quite an improvement over the 100 pop limit of the base game. You also behold a new addition in the expansion, the Noble Gonk droid. They actually fulfill their canon purpose of being a power source, too, which is delightful. I will always be the choom of these gonks. The next mission takes you down to Tatooine itself, notably the first campaign mission in the game to take place there. I know, right? It's hard to believe the base game did not have a mission here. Very un-Star Wars-like to miss out on that first round. Even the first Disney Wars movie started with Dollar General brand Tatooine. Anyway, Dooku dispatched you here to meet with the local organized crime gentry, namely Burka the Hutt. He's holding valuable intel to the Confederacy. You fight your way through a variety of Tatooine lowlifes to get to him. Weequays, Rhodians, Gamorreans of course, a few Quarren. It's a real crime family reunion. Once you get to Burka, he agrees to share the intel with you if you destroy the local Republic starport that's harming his smuggling business. Which, sure, that entirely scans as a corpulent crime boss motivation. Aside from the Jabba's Palace types, the Tatooine classics are here too. Tusken Raiders and Jawas. You even steal droids from the Jawas to make your base. As one might expect, you encounter a Sarlacc pit. If you look closely enough at its death animation, you can see it has the weird beak thing they gave it in the special edition. Never liked that change, honestly. For a desert planet like Tatooine, the outskirts of Mos Osno here are brimming with life. There's of course the native dewbacks, womp rats, eopies, and perhaps most enigmatically, the Rontos.
And they can extend Vader's hearing range to 40 kilohertz, enough to be higher than a Ronto.
Even with all this life on the planet, yet more surprises await you if you build an animal nursery. You can recruit the Nexu and the Reek, the arena monsters Padme and Anakin fight in the brief part of Attack of the Clones where there's actual tension. They're not particularly strong melee combatants against the army of the Republic, but I suppose it's fun to see them again. The critters are just the tip of the iceberg though. This mission is where you can first use some of the entirely new expansion unit types. For example, the air cruiser, whose basic attack is an AVRE-like nuke with massive splash damage that takes ages to reload. Anyhow, one way or another you crush the starport and get the intel from Burka. You find out the Republic is testing secret weapons on the freezing world of Eridan Prime in the Eridus system, which doesn't sound a whole lot like the Republic's MO, yet at least, but I get that they needed something to happen in the campaign. The secret weapon in question here is the Decimator, not to be confused with the Devastator. Incidentally, I was thrilled to find out these were recanonized in Rebels, apparently. You don't actually get to see the Decimator in action yet, but it does have something of an imposing figure. While demolishing the Republic bases in the mission, it occurred to me that the Republic Worker unit is based on the Hostess droid from Dexter Jetster's Diner, which doesn't make a lot of sense as that model was canonically fairly unpopular and bespoke, but still, it's an interesting flourish. I should also say there's an amusing bit of continuity in the written briefing for the mission. They mention ComScan, which you may have heard referenced as the radar-like technology in the movies. Part of it connects to the transparent glass-looking panels here. I realize this is probably the most minor point possible, but I do enjoy when even these little details are honored. After claiming all the decimators on the map, you find out where they're coming from. Alaris Prime, the location of the tutorial campaign way back in the very beginning of the game. The Wookiees have come quite a long way from a fledgling colony to now producing secret weapons for the Republic. While it's nice to see Alaris Prime again, there's not a lot to talk about in the mission on it. You land on an island in a forest full of pissed off Wookiees. They throw waves of themselves at you the second you arrive. Absolute meat grinder. If you explore the map, you can see abandoned Trade Federation and Wookiee bases from the first conflict covered in overgrowth. Nice bit of continuity with the base game there. I'm sure the artists enjoyed putting these assets together. The next mission, far from having anything to do with the Decimators, is about launching an invasion on a planet called Sarapin, not to be confused with Terrapin. The intro sequence claims that,
as you may know, Sarapin provides the core worlds of the Republic with more than 80% of their power.
Which doesn't even remotely pass the smell test for how energy is shown to work in the Star Wars universe. One would expect this planet to come up more often in the canon based on this percentage. I will say it's mentioned in a few other games at least. First used in Star Wars Force Commander, which I've never played, but I'm up for taking on for a video if there's interest. Most recently, it's apparently mentioned in Outlaws. Go figure. It is listed in the Canon Planet directory on StarWars.com, however, it lacks the prominence to even be marked on the official map. All that aside, the first order of business is to crush the orbital defenses of the planet. You can tell the scenario designers really enjoyed the orbital platform tile set. Quite a few campaign missions use it, and it does fit Star Wars quite nicely. You get to make a whole fleet of air cruisers too, which is fun if you can keep them safe. Upon landing on Sarapin, you get to experience the volcanic tile set, complete with the strange Gonarch-like Vapad creatures. Another interesting Star Wars Legends creation introduced in Force Commander and used in a genuinely surprising number of places. After the entire campaign, you finally get to use the Decimators. Looking at their relatively low attack stat, you might initially be disappointed, but do not be unduly deceived. Somehow, they pretty much one-shot most units, and get even more powerful with War Center upgrades. They're sort of like miniature Death Star lasers, which those have actually cropped up a few times in the EU, and even accidentally in The Last Jedi. The punchiness of the Desolators would be improved considerably if their sound effect was more Obelisk of Light though, and less Trooper Blaster. The opposing Republic forces here are commanded by Jor Drakas, a Jedi Knight who appears in this, and only this. He has no lines, and is quickly forgotten. Kind of a waste of a named character, but they can't all be winners. Once you secure the energy storage facilities, you win the campaign. Dooku compliments you and sends you back to construct new Decimator manufacturing facilities on Krant, which you might remember is where the first act of the Rebel campaign happened. Overall, there isn't anything egregious here in terms of canon issues. As you may have noticed, it's mainly referencing stuff from the base game, rather than striking too far out there, Sev'rance and her strange portrait notwithstanding. I'd give it a 7 out of 10. The Republic campaign is locked until you finish the Confederacy campaign, unlike how the base game's campaigns worked. As you might expect from the mission selection screen, the intros and outros are narrated by Mace Windu, a surprisingly controversial figure these days. He's not voiced by Samuel L. Jackson, mind you, but T.C. Carson, who voiced the character in quite a few works, in recent years even.
We all feared an unthinkable war, and I could not help but wonder at the losses yet to be suffered. This is a record of one of those losses. His name was Echuu Shen-Jon, a powerful Jedi Master and a good friend. He was also my Padawan learner.
Bringing Echuu back is a great way to tie into the base game's campaigns, helping the overall story of the combined base game and expansions feel somewhat more cohesive as a result. I should also note, in the extended universe, Mace Windu appears to have had quite a few Padawans, but only one remains canon. The first mission is pure chaos. It has the energy of the first map you make when you figure out how to use a real-time strategy game's map editor, throwing units all over the place just to see them fight. I suppose this is somewhat appropriate for the messy Battle of Geonosis, but it isn't the most balanced experience. You amble around with your army of Jedi hero units, grab some pummels, and bring down the battleship cores. This is considerably less cool than the way they are brought down in the movie, but regardless, sure, why not? Although I'm sure they could have at least worked around the survivors a perimeter create in there somewhere. Echuu's Padawan, Stam Rafe, is here too.
On behalf of the Jedi Council, I order you to drop your weapon.
Stam, no!
A Padawan? Is this the best the Council can do?
He dies. To Sev'rance, even.
I'm sorry that I failed you.
Stam, no. It is I who have failed you.
This might be a record for the shortest time between a Padawan's introduction and death in any Star Wars property. He is immediately assigned a new Padawan, though.
In a hasty vote, the council elected to assign a new Padawan learner to Echuu, Nat Wraith, Stam's sister. Looking back, this may have not been the wisest choice.
Now this raises all sorts of questions. One of the core pillars of the Jedi Order in this time period is no attachments, particularly family. But how this rule squares with Force sensitivity being at least partially genetic is left largely unanswered. Jedi families seem inevitable. More to the point, assigning the deceased sister as a Padawan to Echuu doesn't seem like a great idea for a variety of reasons. What if she resents him for not protecting her brother? What if the wound of his passing prevents them from being an effective duo? What if the two become focused on vengeance rather than their responsibilities to the Order? The seeds of that one in particular are clearly sown already. Echuu's next stop is Serapin to liberate it. Bit of an odd choice for the campaign to take you back to this world so soon after it being the finale of the Confederacy campaign. Regardless, not only do you get access to base building, you also get to use the majority of the tech tree, all the way up to tech level 4. And the Republic has quite a few interesting units. The medic unit, the Cybot Galactica IM-6 droid, despite being introduced in this game, is surprisingly Disney canon, appearing in a few post-Disney acquisition fact books. The first of which being Star Wars Rogue One AT-ACT Deluxe Book and 3D Wood model, which is kind of a darling way to be recanonized. Setting aside the designation, you can tell it's based on the design of the JN-66 analysis droid, which appeared in a deleted scene in Attack of the Clones. Quite an interesting place to draw inspiration from, and definitely fits well into the pantheon of droids from this era. Anyhow, you fight your way, again, through the volcanic landscape. In addition to the Confederacy forces, there's also a Trade Federation contingency, which is a nice touch to add more variety to your enemies. After fighting your way to the Citadel, you capture the administrator of the planet, Xian Finis, no relation to Cyril Figgis.
I have questioned the Confederacy officer, Xian Finis. He has revealed that the Hutt cartel on Tatooine may have information on the whereabouts of Sev'rance Tan.
Didn't think we needed to redo that plot beat from the previous campaign too, but here we are. Though I can't really complain, far from being a retread, they packed some interesting bits into this scenario. To start, you get to talk to Jabba himself, with his aide Bib Fortuna present. No Salacious Crumb, unfortunately. They made a pretty nice model for his famous Ubrikian sail barge, real-time strategy game size discrepancies aside. Jabba pledges his support if you eliminate Burka. You currently have little to work with in terms of an army, so you turn to the Junlan locals for help.
We have little to offer you, Master Jedi, sir. The Sand People raid our town almost every night now. They grow bolder and bolder with each attack.
As you approach the Tusken Raider village, you pass by a Bomar temple. They even included a few Bomar monks wandering around, which if you're not familiar is the brain in a fishbowl with spider legs you briefly see in Return of the Jedi. A fascinating design that doesn't really quite look like anything else in Star Wars, classic or modern. Also on the map is the noble Krayt Dragon, which some of you may remember encountering in a spectacular fashion in KOTOR. The Tusken village itself is very much in line with the one you see in Attack of the Clones. They even fought to add the massive creatures the Tusken appear to keep as pets. You even, get to eliminate Tusken children. Quite a few of them, actually, and they have a surprising amount of health to boot. With this campaign, Galactic Battlegrounds has joined a select few games featuring the elimination of children. Perhaps the only RTS in this category. The game doesn't linger on this, but I believe we're meant to understand this as part of Echuu and his Padawan's fall. Again, a little on the nose to repeat the plot beat from Clones directly, but I guess it does rhyme. The outro for the mission is surprisingly emotional.
The signs were all there. Why didn't I see them? Was I so blind to our purpose that I let it get in the way of better judgment? By now, I was beginning to suspect that Echuu was letting his emotions get the better of him. Emotions that could very well lead him to the dark side.
Echuu and company head to Krant to take on the Decimator construction facilities, but because the developers can't help but have another space tileset mission, first wind up striking a Trade Federation mining compound on its moon, Irene. To shake things up, I constructed a Delta 7 Aethersprite class light interceptor, or more informally, the Jedi Starfighter. It's pretty potent, so don't get addicted. Tremendous vision range, and can even become permanently stealthed with an upgrade from the Jedi Temple. Definitely one of the cooler vehicles from the prequels. Regrettably, they do not have the hilariously overpowered Force abilities you use in the classic Jedi Starfighter game, but that might have been a bit much to balance. After liberating the moon, Echuu and Padawan set their sights on Krant itself. Overzealously, they land without telling the Council because it would, quote, take too long.
She is to be inspecting a contingent of decimators. We should inform the Jedi Council.
No, Krant is not far. Informing the Council would take too long.
Which is pretty rich in a universe where FTL communication exists that clearly works over any distance. Confusingly, this is immediately contradicted in the next cutscene.
Not suspecting how deeply Echuu had been compromised, I convinced the Jedi Council to approve a landing on Krant.
Either way, you're dropped on Krant for a baseless mission to destroy the Decimator facilities. I should also mention the mission's name, Temptation's Folly, goes extremely hard. Surprisingly, not a reference to anything either that I could find. As the hunt for Tan kicks off, Echuu warns against vengeance, though he clearly thirsts for it.
That is the presence of Sev'rance Tan. She is here to oversee the Decimator production.
She must pay for what she did to my brother!
Seek revenge only at your peril, Padawan. That path leads only to the dark side.
Your feelings betray you, Master. He was my brother, but he was also your Padawan learner. You seek what I seek.
Enough!
The mission itself has you fighting your way through the Decimator facilities. There's not really any connections of note to the larger canon here, but that's fine. It's good that the game staked out more ground for itself. The main challenge is keeping your army alive, especially your heroes.
Will you not leave, just as I did, Mother?
I was pretty surprised they added such an emotional voice line for when your Padawan dies as a mission fail state. At the end of the map, your army pieces out for some reason, leaving Echuu and Nat to take on Tan. It does not go well.
So we meet again, Jedi Master. It seems there isn't a Padawan you possess that I cannot take away from you.
No, not!
Fear not. I sense much anger in this pupil of yours. She is far more valuable to us alive than dead. I feel your anger too, Jedi. I know you seek revenge for your fallen Padawan. As much as I enjoy seeing you journey down this dark path, I'm afraid I can't oblige you. Farewell, Echuu.
Absolutely mogged. Nat is captured, leaving Echuu staring down the prospect of losing a Padawan to the dark side. credit where credit is due. This is potentially the most interesting plot beat in the entire base game and expansion. The next mission begins looking like it could be baseless, but you can subtly tell it's not because you start with resources. Despite the game previously implying you're not seeking the Council's permission with this mission, you begin in contact with Mace Windu.
General Shen-Jon, I question the wisdom of this decision. We can hardly risk you and your army for this one Padawan.
Did you do any less for Obi-Wan and Anakin on Geonosis, Master Windu?
All right, Echuu. Do what you must, but make sure your feelings are clear in this matter. Sev'rance Tan will use your anger against you.
I shall let the Force be my guide, Master.
You quickly take over an abandoned Wookiee base to your west and start engaging significant enemy forces from both sides. New to the game, appearing in this mission, are the Shock, known for their tremendous asses. Not to be confused, of course, with Shock T, who is not, by all accounts, quite as caked up. Strange to come across the creatures here on Krant as they are native to Naboo, but I do enjoy seeing all the strange Star Wars fauna. As their ampleness might suggest, they can be harvested for quite a lot of food. As you explore the map, you can encounter a rather strange Easter egg in the extreme west corner. Anakin and Palpatine and a Sith temple. The Sith temple is actually on a volcanic damage spot, so it amusingly crumbles over time. This is pretty clearly an Easter egg. There are quite a few of these kind of Easter eggs in the game, and I gotta say, I don't think they add all that much. In fact, they tend to detract from the feeling of any of this being canon, particularly when it's characters who in no way, shape, or form should be here showing up randomly. Anyhow, you fight your way to Tan's fortress to rescue Nat.
Do you wish to take my place, my Jedi friend? Would you like to stand at Count Dooku's side when the Republic falls and the Jedi are destroyed?
After what is probably a few too many cinematic attack animations, Echuu wins the fight.
Savor your victory while you can, Jedi. You and your kind are soon to be extinguished.
Master, it's over. She's gone. Let us return to the Jedi Council.
No, not. You must go back and report what has happened here.
But Master Echuu...
It is too late for me now. For too long, I've allowed anger to guide my actions. Now the dark side is forever part of my destiny. Perhaps with time I can return to the Jedi Order. But for now I must remain alone to reflect on what I have done. Learn from my mistakes, and you'll make a fine Jedi Knight someday.
May the Force be with you, Master Echuu.
This is a surprisingly bittersweet ending to a Star Wars real-time strategy game campaign. Credit to Echuu, realizing that things were getting too real and taking a step back is something a lot of Jedi could have benefited from. Goes without saying, it saved his life too, especially as he's a general in the Clone Wars and all. This also retroactively gives his appearance in the base game a lot more impact, so pretty good ending all told. There is one final bonus mission on Coruscant, but it's not what you might think. Despite ostensibly being associated with the Republic campaign, it catapults you far past the Clone Wars to significantly after Return of the Jedi, when the Rebel Alliance takes the planet. Han Solo provides the intro and outro narration.
Following a cocky maneuver by Rogue Squadron, the planetary defense shields had been knocked out. We had one specific target we needed to take down in order to declare victory, the Imperial Palace.
The cocky maneuver by Rogue Squadron could be alluding to the events that take place in X-Wing Wedge's Gamble, where the planetary shields are brought down by Rogue Squadron's infiltration. However, none of the unique characters introduced in this scenario tie to any other EU properties. In fact, 2 of the 3 named characters don't even have Wikipedia pages. The only one who does is the main bad guy, Tal Ashen. Rebel General Rand Taylor leads the assault, with his wife being imprisoned in the Imperial Palace, a surprising final bit of pathos for a bonus mission. General Solo and Grandmaster Luke are here too, of course. Luke, in his truly biggest form, can even convert buildings using his Force abilities. In addition to your ground forces, you have an impressive squadron of X-Wings and Y-Wings at your disposal, with even some B-Wings joining you mid-mission. It's good that you have them too, as you fight TIE Defender and even TIE Advanced models. As you approach the Imperial Palace, you fight Tal Ashen himself in his AT-AT, flanked by red-clad Imperial guards. You quickly dispatch them and save the day. Rand Taylor's wife, too.
Rand, I never thought I'd see you again.
Coruscant is free, and you have been reunited. The Force is truly with us.
A little bit too quick to be that emotionally resonant, all told, but a nice moment. The ending narration brings it home.
With the seat of Imperial power under Alliance control, it would only be a matter of time before we could all finally live in peace, free from the bonds of tyranny.
This sequence really highlights how much cooler Han is as a general of the rebellion instead of running his whatever-the-fuck monster smuggling business in the sequels. I'm not even that much of a Han Solo guy, but it just seems like such a tired waste of his character. Anyway, taken together, do the Confederacy and Republic campaigns fit into the larger canon? Mostly, sure, why not? I do think these are worthy stories, even if a little on the underwritten side. Admittedly, I haven't watched the Clone Wars series enough to say if it fits well with that, but based on my current level of knowledge, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10, as it's really more of its own thing than most of the other campaigns, setting aside the bonus mission. You can really see the influence of the greater extended universe on Galactic Battlegrounds. You can especially see it in the genuinely impressive array of unused heroes available in the scenario editor. The Outrider from Shadows of the Empire, Lobot, or Poggle the Lesser? Okay, I didn't know the character's name, but I don't think I would have guessed Poggle in 100 years. People have done amazing things with this editor, and beyond it, in modding. The venerable Expanding Fronts mod, which adds entirely new civilizations and mechanics, is likely worth an entire video on its own. Let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in that. One of the more surprising details of the game is that the Arubesh text in the cutscenes is actual words. Admittedly, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised by this, but I appreciate that they did it. Given how annoyingly low resolution most of the cutscenes are, I'm not about to translate every panel manually. But maybe I'll give it another look if there's ever an app that easily translates this stuff Google Lens style. I also wanted to mention that the game includes a few developer diaries, always a goldmine when putting together projects like this, though they are a little on the short side, coming in at about 5 minutes of video total.
And of course we kind of had to come up with what we wanted for the Wookiee environment.
Well, as a civilization, you know, I think one of the big misconceptions that a lot of the fans had were that they were this primitive society and that they didn't have a technology, and that was one of the things I thought was really fun that we got to explore quite a bit was in reading a little bit on the Wookiee lore and such. I mean, we were able to find out that they were very technological. It just at the same time they had that kind of, you know, that very zen merge with nature sort of thing. So that one was a lot of fun for me because I really got to spend a lot more time experimenting with more creative ideas, where the tutorial we really had to go in a very linear fashion and what we could and couldn't do.
Kinda fascinating to see a glimpse of the developer team a whole quarter century ago. Perhaps the insane level of compression adds to the charm too. Overall, I think Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds has aged pretty well, all things considered. Certainly better than Star Trek New Worlds did, that's for sure. Good luck even getting that one to run on modern hardware. Really goes to show that being fully 3D isn't everything, especially with as charming as the sprites are to this day. Galactic Battlegrounds is a worthy game, and worthy in terms of the wider Star Wars canon too, even now. Voodoo hide helmet polishing as some of it may feel. It's also hard not to miss this era of LucasArts games. Maybe not all of them were smash hits, but it was awesome that we got experimental games in a variety of different genres, like the Gungan Frontier, DroidWorks, or even Pit Droids. No disrespect to modern Star Wars games we get, of course, but the difference is palpable. The lack of new experimental Star Wars games makes me feel a profound absence. And like they say, absence makes the heart grow fonder. Thank you for joining me. Overall, I think Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds, oh fuck me.